Welcome back to Barracuda Bites. I am your host, Barracuda. Here in this episode, in our series on Ronald H. Nash's The Meaning of History, in chapters 1 and 2, we examine the distinction between scientific and philosophical history and how worldviews shape our understanding of the past. Chapter 3 dives deep into one of the major patterns people have seen in history, the cyclical view. Nash explores its ancient roots, why it was and remains appealing to many, its key proponents like the Stoics, its strengths and fatal weaknesses, and why a Christian perspective ultimately rejects it in favor of a linear, purposeful view. This chapter is foundational for understanding the contrast with biblical history, because this is a deeper exploration. It's going to take us a little bit more time. So grab your notes, grab a coffee, let's get into it. Section 1. What is the cyclical view and the ancient roots and core ideas? Nash opens chapter 3 by explaining the cyclical view sees history as repeating itself in endless loops, much like the seasons, cycles of day and night, or the birth, growth, decline, death, rebirth pattern in nature. There is no ultimate beginning or final end. Events reoccur in similar patterns across generations and civilizations. This perspective dominated much of the ancient thought, especially in Greek and Roman philosophy. Nash highlights the Stoics as prime examples. They believed in eternal recurrence. The universe periodically dissolves in fire and then reconstitutes exactly as before, with the same people, events, and even the same conversations repeating infinitely. Thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and early Stoics saw this as comforting. Everything is ordered by divine reason, logos, and nothing truly new or shocking happens. Similar ideas appear in other ancient cultures. Babylonian, Egyptian, and some Eastern traditions view time as circular. Empires rise with vigor, reach a peak, grow, decadent and corrupt, collapse, and then a new one emerges to repeat the process. History becomes predictable in its rhythms, but ultimately without unique, irreversible significance. Nash notes how this view aligns with a pagan worldview. Multiple gods or an impersonal fate governs the cycles. Human life is bound to the wheel of time, and there's little room for permanent progress or a final resolution to evil and suffering. Think about it. Have you noticed patterns in history repeating? Rise and fall of powers, moral cycles in societies? That's part of the intuitive appeal Nash discusses. Section 2. The attractions and strengths of the cyclical view. Why has this view been around for a long time, and why has this view been so enduring? Nash explores several compelling reasons. First, it matches observable reality. We see empires and civilizations follow similar trajectories. Growth through virtue or innovation, peak prosperity, then moral decay, internal division, external conquest, and collapse. Think of the sequence in Greece, Rome, or even modern parallels people draw. It feels realistic and grounded in nature. Second, it provides psychological comfort. In a chaotic world, knowing that This too shall pass, and patterns repeat can reduce anxiety. The Stoics found peace in accepting fate and focusing on personal virtue amid inevitable cycles. Third, it offers explanatory power for why bad things happen repeatedly. Human nature doesn't fundamentally change. Societies go through predictable phases of virtue and vice. Fourth, it avoids the problem of the end. Linear views must grapple with where history is headed and questions of final judgment or utopia. Cyclical views sidestep that with endless recurrence. Nash fairly presents these strengths before turning to critique. He acknowledges that Christians can appreciate recurring patterns. Proverbs speaks of patterns in human behavior, but insists they are not ultimate. Where do you see the cyclical patterns playing out today in politics, culture, or personal life? Section 3. The problems and weaknesses of the cyclical view. Nash then systematically dismantles the cyclical view, drawing heavily on Christian insight, especially from Augustine. And here are the key problems. It undermines human freedom and moral responsibility. If everything repeats exactly, choices don't ultimately matter. Your actions are fate to recur. This leads to fatalism rather than purposeful action. 2. It denies the uniqueness of events. The Bible presents history as fulfilled with one-time, irreversible acts. Creation, the fall, the Exodus, the incarnation, the resurrection, and the future second coming. These aren't repeatable. They have eternal significance. A strict cycle would require Christ to die and rise infinitely, something Nash and Augustine sees as absurd and contrary to Scripture. 3. It offers no real hope. Endless repetition without resolution means evil and suffering never end. They just cycle. There's no ultimate redemption, justice, or new creation. This contrasts sharply with the Christian hope of a linear arc culminating in God's victory. And 4. Philosophical and scientific issues. Nash notes that modern understandings of the universe expanding with a beginning in the Big Bang challenge eternal cycles. Also, the view struggles with the sense many have of genuine progress or moral leaning across generations. And finally, moral implications. Augustine, in The City of God, attacked the cyclical view for its pessimism and for trapping humanity in futility. Nash echoes this. Christianity introduced a revolutionary linear view where time is direction and purpose under a sovereign God. Nash contrasts this with how some try to blend views, like the spiral theories we'll look at later, but argues the pure cyclical model fails both descriptively and existentially. How does the cyclical view leave you feeling? Resigned or longing for something more? Section 4. The Christian alternative and why it matters. Nash concludes by reinforcing the linear Christian view as superior. History is God's story, a purposeful progression from creation through redemption to consummation. Events matter. Choices have eternal weight. Evil is real but not ultimate. God overrules it for good. This equips believers to learn from reoccurring patterns. That's wisdom, without fatalism, to work for justice and renewal in the present, and to live with hope. Nash ties this back to worldview. The cyclical view flows from pagan assumptions, the linear from biblical theism. What's a practical takeaway? Understanding these views helps us critique modern narratives, whether fatalistic, history repeats, cynicism, or naive progressivism, and they ground ourselves in Scripture's grand narrative. So, how does embracing a linear, purposeful view of history change how you live today? Before we conclude, let's take a look at the core of Toynbee's challenge and response theory. Toynbee rejected simplistic explanations for the rise and fall of civilizations based on race, environment, or inevitable biological decay. Instead, he proposed that civilizations emerge, grow, and decline through a dynamic process of challenge and response. So, let's look at this. First, the genesis and growth. Civilizations arise when a society faces a significant but manageable challenge. That is, harsh climate, external invasion, internal pressures, or blows from other groups. A creative minority, inspired leaders, elites, or thinkers, responds creatively and effectively. This success inspires the majority to follow, leading to growth. And civilizations strive as long as they continue meeting successive challenges with fresh, adaptive responses. And then there's the breakdown and disintegration. Decline sets in when the creative minority loses vitality, often turning into a dominant minority that relies on force, intimidation, or rigidity rather than innovation. Responses become mechanical or repressive, militarism, nationalism, or tyranny. The internal proletariat, discontented masses, and the external proletariat, barbarians or outsiders, grow alienated. Civilizations don't die from murder, external conquest alone, but largely from suicide, failure to respond creatively. Toynbee analyzed 21 through 26 civilizations comparatively, identifying recurring stages: genesis, growth, times of trouble, universal state, and disintegration. This has clear cyclical flavor, rise and fall patterns, repeat across history. Here's how Toynbee's challenge pure cyclical views. Pure cyclical theories, ancient Stoic external reoccurrence, or Spengler's organic morphology of cultures as inevitable birth, maturity, decay, death, see history as closed loops with no ultimate progress or escape. The same pattern repeats infinitely. Individual events lack unique, lasting significance. Toynbee's model challenges this in several ways. Number one, repetition with a difference, the spiral element. While civilizations rise and fall in similar ways, there can be cumulative learning, spiritual growth, or higher level advancement across cycles. History spirals upward rather than circling flatly. Responses to challenges can produce genuine novelty and progress, even if not inevitable. 2. The role of human agency and creativity. Unlike fatalistic cycles where decline is predetermined, Toynbee's emphasis is on freedom and responsibility. Civilizations are not doomed by cosmic fate or biology. Outcomes depends on creative responses. This injects hope and moral urgency absent in strict cycles. 3. Spiritual and ethical dimensions. Toynbee's increasingly stressed spiritual forces over purely material or economic ones. Later volumes show openness to religious, even Christian, influenced interpretations, seeing history as potentially moving toward higher forms of human unity or divine encounter. This contrasts with purely pagan or materialistic cycles. And finally, not inevitable doom. Unlike Spangler, Toynbee's idea did not see the death of civilization as unavoidable. A society may continue responding successfully, or higher religious universal churches may emerge from breakdowns to carry forward meaning into new eras. Nash appreciates Toynbee's comparative breadth and rejection of naive optimism or pure fatalism, but ultimately finds the spiral view less satisfactory than the biblical linear model. For Nash, Scripture provides a clear teleology, purposeful direction from creation, fall, redemption, consummation, grounded in God's sovereignty, with unique, non-repeatable events like the incarnation and the resurrection that pure or even spiral cycles struggle to accommodate. Let's look through a magnifying glass at the strengths and criticisms of Toynbee's model. Strengths, per Nash and others. His model explains observable patterns without fatalism. It highlights leadership, creativity, and worldview factors. It's broad, comparative scope that influenced later global history approaches. But the criticisms, it's overly schematic. Critics say Toynbee forced data into his model. It has empirical weaknesses. Some civilizations don't fit neatly. Nash and Christian thinkers note it still lacks the robust eschatological hope and divine purpose of linear biblical history. In the context of our podcast series, Toynbee serves as a bridge in Chapter 3, or more fully, in the chapter on Spangler and Toynbee. He shows the limits of ancient cyclical thinking while pointing towards something more directional, yet stopping short of full Christian linear teleology. This hybrid makes Toynbee's particularly relevant today. Many observe repeating patterns, that is, rise, fall of empires, cultural decadence, but still hope for progress or renewal through wise responses. It challenges us to ask, are we creatively responding to our current civilization's challenges or repeating the failures of the past? So here are some key takeaways and applications of our study so far. Summarizing Nash's Chapter 3, the cyclical view sees history as endless, repeating patterns with no ultimate goal. It has intuitive appeal, matches nature and experience, but serious flaws: fatalism, denial of uniqueness, lack of hope. Christianity, via the Bible and thinkers like Augustine, offer a linear alternative with direction, meaning, and redemption. We can acknowledge patterns without being trapped by cycles. This week, I want you to observe a cyclical pattern in news or life, political rise, fall, etc. Ask, what wisdom can I gain? And how does Scripture's linear story give hope or call me to action? Discuss this with others. Now, Nash's analysis prepares us for later chapters on Christian thinkers who developed the linear view. This is important. And I don't want you to miss what's coming in the next couple of podcasts. Once again, thank you for spending time with me. This is Barracuda Bites Podcast, and I am your host, Barracuda. That's our deep dive into Chapter 3. Next time, we'll move to the first Christian philosophers and Augustine's powerful response. If this series is helping, share it and reflect on one insight. History isn't a meaningless wheel. It's going somewhere under God's direction. Once again, thanks for listening. And go to Amazon and pick up Nash's The Meaning of History and read it for more understanding. We'll see you in the next episode.